everyone, welcome back. It's Melissa, and I did a little video last spring where I swapped out my eyeshadow palette wardrobe for a bunch of palettes that I wanted to use that's like kind of said spring to me. And I really enjoyed doing that. It kind of helped me refocus on some palettes I hadn't used in a while. It just made it a little bit easier to get ready in the morning. And a couple of you mentioned that you were wondering if I was going to do a fall edition of that, and that's what we're doing today. My goal here is to switch out my palette wardrobe, kind of like you do with your clothing, but with your eyeshadows, and pull out the palettes that probably say fall to me more than other palettes do. So I tried to keep this a pretty tight and concise grouping of palettes. So I have 3 new palettes that are real new to my collection that I'm going to keep in this group, and then 7 from my stash. So let's quickly look at the ones that are brand new in case you missed them. So what are you looking for in a fall palette, you ask? What I'm looking for is maybe something that's a little bit smokier, maybe has a little bit more earthy tones to it, but you know, I have to be careful I don't go too warm because I don't like warm on me that much. A little bit deeper shades. That's kind of was my thinking. Let's jump into it. And we're going to start with the newest palettes in my collection in case you missed them from my haul video. So the first one is this little palette from Bare Minerals. It's their Bounce and Blur eyeshadow palette in the color combination called Dawn. So I wasn't expecting a whole lot from this palette. I really just wanted to try the formula because I thought the formula was really unique and it was supposed to be like bouncy, and it's not really bouncy in my opinion. However, it is it's a weird texture. I would say it feels a little bit like a cream to powder texture, because it feels a little cool initially and then it dries down to a powder consistency. And the thing that I wasn't really aware of when I picked this up is that they all have a little bit of like a pearlized shimmer to it, which is an interesting idea because it's not like glittery, and the shimmers are really fine, like really super fine. And so they're not like jump out at you, but they just offer like a little brightness to the eye. It's very hard to describe. And I really like the colors in this palette. So I would say the only downside to this palette is it does fade as the day wears on. And then, well, you know, by the time you come home, you're pretty faded out, especially if you have hooded eyes like I do. Where that hood overlaps, it really hits it hard. But what's up in your crease is still pretty good. So I really like this. I think you can do some great looks for this, and I'm excited to continue using it. I used it a lot last week and was really super happy with it. Okay, I've droned on long enough about that one. The next one is from Dose of Colors. It's the pretty cool 5-pan gradient eyeshadow palette. Admittedly, I haven't used this very much other than to kind of swatch it. I am looking forward to playing with this. This is next up on my list to play with. I did, however, play around a little bit with this brush in there, and I don't know who thought this brush was a good idea. It just kicks up so much powdery, it's awful. And it's not big enough. I don't even know why I'm putting it back in the case, but I just did. So this is another one that I am super excited to be using this fall. Oh my goodness. I know I've shown this clip before, but the promo video of this, it just was fantastic. I might have to play it now in its entirety. Okay, Now, the last of my new palettes is the Anastasia Beverly Hills Jackie Aina collaboration, and I am just diving into that right now. There are tons of videos out there on this palette, but I am planning on doing a couple different looks and sharing my ideas with you on that. I was excited to see this palette because there's a lot of color in it. So I am wearing this taupey color all over my lid today. It's like a one shadow look in the shade Lituation. And man, I hope I have high expectations for this palette. So let's talk about some returning favorites, some things that I had picked up in the spring but decided were too fall-like and kind of set them aside. I've pulled those back out. So we're just going to jump into it. I think we'll start with some Drugstore, because one of the things I really wanted to do when I did this was to include a couple of Drugstore palettes in each time I roll over my eyeshadow palette in my little special drawer there. So we're going to start with this from Rimmel. It's the Magnifies Smoked Edition. Now, I love these Rimmel eyeshadow palettes. I think the quality is excellent, especially for the price. So these palettes often look like dupes for some of the more popular Urban Decay palettes. They certainly look like that in the format, and a lot of the color choices also are a match. And I would say this one is almost an exact dupe for the now discontinued Naked Smoked palette, which is one of my favorites. And I almost put that in this grouping but decided to go with this because I wanted to give it some love. It's an awesome eyeshadow formula, and if this isn't your bag, go ahead and look online. They have lots of different color choices. Let's clean this off because it's pretty dirty. The other palette is from Milani. It's the Soft and Sultry palette, and it is their 12 pan palette. It came out last spring, and I used it a little bit, but I really want to give it a little bit more love. This is definitely a neutral palette, but it has a lot of smokiness going on here, and that is why it made the cut for this fall collection of mine. It's not a collection. It's just, you know what I mean. So those are my two Drugstore choices. And I think the quality on this is nice. It's not like the best of the best, but for a Drugstore palette, it's pretty darn good. I like the Rimmel a little bit better, the formula in the Rimmel. So let's talk about one of my favorite eyeshadow formulas, and it's the Marc Jacobs formula in their Eye-Conic multi-finish eye palettes. So I have 3 of these. I had one in the spring edition, and I have 2 that I'm going to use in this fall edition. The first one is the Stiletto, and it's in this beautiful limited edition packaging, and it is so gorgeous. So this is like taupey grays, purples, I don't know. You can see it. It is fantastic. I'm just so excited to be using it again. I love these little palettes because they're somewhat of an edited color story. They have a nice assortment of finishes, so it's not all matte, it's not all shimmery, it's a nice collection and a nice range from light to dark. I think Marc Jacobs does a beautiful job with these smaller palettes. The other one is the Edgitorial, which is a lot of neutrals but with this beautiful pop of green, and I did a green smoky eye look with this that was so beautiful, just so beautiful. I think I'm just like so excited to be using this again. Now, could I have pulled it out any time to use it? Yes, I could have, but I was sticking with my plan, and I knew that I would be pulling this out in the fall, and it would feel super fresh and super just lovely all over again. Okay, so let's see, where am I going to go next? Let's talk about this. I also pulled out the Lorac Pro palette number 4, and I have to be really honest, when I picked this up, it was one of those palettes that I picked up. I really wanted it. and then I really barely used it. So that is one of the reasons why it is in this little grouping right now, because I want to play with it a little bit more. I really enjoy the Lorac eyeshadow formula, and I feel like they do a beautiful job with their palettes. They really do. It is, you know, top row is matte, the bottoms are like shimmery, and there's always a great assortment of light to dark. I think they're very thoughtful about how they put their palettes together. Sometimes some of these companies, they throw these palettes out there and I'm like, was there any thought in how you put this palette together? It seems so haphazard. It's hard to look at and like pull a look together in your head like, oh yes, I'm going to use these certain colors. But they're so mixed up in the palette, it's really even hard to like decide what to do. And that is just too much work for me. I really can't do that. I needed a little bit more organization to the palette layout that makes sense for me. It's what I'm used to. The palette that I'm thinking of that was so disorganized and people really had so much to say about it was I think last holiday, Kat Von D had a palette that looked like a stained glass window, and the colors were very scattered all over the place, and people were like, ew, I don't like this palette. And someone took the shades and organized them in like a better way, and people were like, whoa, that's the same palette? That looks gorgeous, and I could be excited to use that. And I'm thinking, you know, if you're a cosmetic company and you're not listening to what people are saying, not only about your own products, but about other companies' products, you would have missed a really important message. Now, I don't think Kat Von D cares, and that's, you know, a whole nother story and a whole nother topic that I'm not going to talk about, but you all know what I'm talking about. I didn't mean to get so preachy. That was kind of weird. All right, we're down to the last two palettes. And this one is from NARS. It is the Hot Nights Face palette. I also picked this up in the spring, during the spring Sephora sale. And I really think these colors are so beautiful. It has like a highlight and a blush or a contour. It's a bronzer and a highlight. So I am very interested to play with this again. I used it a little bit when I first got it. It's a little on the warm side for me. Like, look at those two colors. But I think I can make it work. I mean, I know I can make it work because I used it in the spring, but it definitely had a fall vibe to it. So I decided to set it aside and bring it out again in the fall. This, I think, might be a fun little travel palette. We're going away at the end of October. Yes, we're going away again. But for our anniversary, so it's just Bill and I. So the last palette in the collection is going to be one of my favorites. It's the Viseart Cool Mattes palette, but it's the original Cool Mattes palette. I'm not such a fan of the like updated Cool Mattes palette that they put out. I feel like there's just something about that I don't like. I love the assortment of colors in this palette more than I like in the other palette. In the other palette, it feels a little bit like each row is like a trio and it's gradient, and you know, this is more interesting to me than that. And I noticed that it's not on the Sephora website anymore. None of these original like classic Viseart palettes are on the Sephora website anymore, but they can still be picked up off of Beautylish, and probably, does Viseart have their own website? Anyway, I included links down below to all these palettes where you can pick them up still, but for some reason Sephora isn't carrying these classic palettes anymore. They carry a lot of Viseart, but it's all like their newer stuff, like the Warm Edit and the little minis, and you know, maybe the price point of these bigger palettes was a little cost prohibitive, but they also have those gigantic palettes, which don't get me started on those gigantic palettes. I think palettes everywhere is going to be the topic of another video very soon. So let me know what palettes you are excited to bring out and start using again in the fall. I know fall's practically here. It is almost fall, or it is fall. Is it fall? Let me know. What are you pulling out from your collection that you're most excited to be using again? And I will say, I had a couple other palettes in there originally that I thought, oh, these be good to use around the holidays. They're a little bit fancier. And I thought, no, I'm going to put those aside and maybe do like a shorter holiday edition, like some of my favorite holiday type palettes. So this is kind of becoming a little bit of a theme until I run out of palettes, if that ever happens. I publish videos every Saturday morning, and I'll include a link to last week's video right up here in case you missed it. And I hope you will hit this little bee icon and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.